The Colorado Plateau is rich in human history. Between 4,000 and 1,000 years ago, the archaic, Fremont, and ancestral Pueblan cultures thrived in this area. In fact, 2,000 years ago, the population of the plateau was greater than it is today. Their dwellings inside cliff walls provide a clue that their existence may not always have been peaceful. Indeed, there is some evidence that they were warlike societies practicing cannibalism. Since they vanished before the arrival of the first Europeans, there is much conjecture as to whether their demise was due to natural calamities like extensive drought, or to social factors such as wars or poor management of the land which gave them sustenance. Their construction methods and the artifacts they left behind are testimony to their level of sophistication. All throughout Canyon Country, one can find the remains of storage granaries used to keep food supplies away from animals and the elements. The dwellings and villages of the ancestral Pueblans reveal a very high level of societal organization. Only a highly structured society could construct multi-level dwellings such as can be found in Mesa Verde, maintain an elaborate network of roads linking the various communities, and have trading links as far away as with the Aztec civilization in Mexico. In Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, these are the ruins of Pueblo Bonito, an integrated structure containing over 600 residential and ceremonial rooms. For hundreds of years, until the rise of New York City skyscrapers in the late 19th century, Pueblo Bonito was the largest dwelling complex in the world. Kivas, which were round social or religious gathering places, are in great abundance in Chaco Canyon. Entry and egress into the kivas was always through an opening in the roof. At Mesa Verde, one can get a taste of what it was like to move about from one level to another in the complex. One of the most haunting reminders of these lost civilizations are the literally thousands of pictographs and petroglyphs found on cliff walls throughout the plateau. Pictographs are paintings on light-colored rock. Petroglyphs are etchings in desert varnish on the rock faces. This, on the other hand, is a more modern phenomenon called graffiti. The Great Gallery seen here, known as the Louvre of the Southwest, consists of a 200-foot-long panel of humanoid figures whose significance remains a complete mystery. The Great Gallery has stood for 2,000 to 3,000 years, largely exposed to the elements, a testament not only to the artistry of its makers, but to the quality of their materials. The probable descendants of the ancient ones, today's Hopi and Navajo Indians, still dwell in the Canyon Country, some in their traditional hogans. The 19th century brought major changes to the Colorado Plateau. The first explorations of the Green and Colorado rivers by Major John Wesley Powell rank among the major exploration sagas of the period. The history of Utah is also the history of Mormon settlement. They brought their wagon trains over the most inhospitable terrain, including the Hole in the Rock Road, part of which is now a great hiking trail. The start of European settlement had significant impact on the natural environment. The dense trees along the river bank are tamarisk, brought from Europe to stabilize the banks. It worked all too well, and the tamarisk spread throughout the southwest, crowding out all native vegetation along the rivers. Canyon Country is a great place to hide, and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid holed up in this cabin for a while. The myth of the American pioneer led some into attempts at scrounging out a living in the remote corners of Canyon Country. Most of these homesteads, such as this one dating from the 1960s, have been abandoned. The Second World War and the rush to find uranium for the atomic bomb brought major changes to the Colorado Plateau, which was rich in ore deposits. The ore was soon depleted, the boom went bust, and abandoned mines are now found all over. Abandoned mine shafts make great habitat for bats, and this gated one is designed to keep people out, but allow bats to fly in. Outside the national parks, the enjoyment of some accessible canyons can be severely marred by the presence of off-road vehicles. The fumes left by dirt bikes linger for hours, and the sound carries forever, bouncing off from wall to wall. Fortunately, most canyon bottoms are simply too rough for them to go through. And then there are the jeeps. Best avoid Moab during Jeep Safari Week. Cows know nothing of cryptobiotic soil, and over the last century have destroyed much of it, turning landscapes with varied vegetation into vast areas of desert. Restoration efforts are nowhere near on the scale of what would be required, especially since cattle continue to be allowed in sensitive areas. This incongruous site in the middle of the desert comes courtesy of the Glen Canyon Dam on the Utah-Arizona border. Many consider it one of the biggest environmental mistakes in U.S. history, and certainly the worst catastrophe to hit the Colorado Plateau since the arrival of cows. Lake Powell has a shoreline longer than the entire west coast of the United States because of the dozens of side canyons that were flooded along with Glen Canyon itself. Built in the early 60s, it took 17 years to fill the reservoir, flooding one of the most beautiful places on the continent. Glen Canyon, every bit as spectacular as the Grand Canyon, now lies under 800 feet of water. Or at least it did, until a major drought, possibly linked to climate change, started lowering the lake levels in the mid-90s. This is what the top end of the lake looked like in the early 90s with a full reservoir. This is what it looks like now. Lake Powell has lost 60% of its water, and canyons once drowned are now re-emerging for the first time in decades. This is another view of the upper end of the lake, where you can see the former Haight Marina and Tourist Center at the top of the picture. This is not an abandoned airport runway. It is the former Marina boat launch, abandoned by the lake. Some will consider this a good thing, others not so much. But in spite of its many problems, the Colorado Plateau remains one of the great natural wonders of the world. So I'd like to end this presentation with a final tribute to my favorite place.